Hi, this is Grady Pruitt from gradypruitt.com with an Images for Internet Marketers tip. And today I wanted to talk about a problem that I see with a lot of images. Uh, One of the things that kind of brought it to mind is I was looking on the Affilorama forums and was talking with looking at a post by Rob Ting 8. And one of the things that he was one of the things I noticed in his header image is that it was a problem similar to this image that I have up on the screen right now that we're looking at, where uh, the text in places seemed to almost blend into the background so that you couldn't really read the text. And this is something I see a lot of time, a lot all over the place. I see it a lot. I see it almost every day in images on Facebook. And it's actually one of those things that's very easy to fix just by putting some sort of a little background separation in between the text and the image. For example, I have this image already set up here where I have a layer between the text and the background, uh, so that whenever I turn it on, it gives a little bit of separation between the background and the between the text and the background, but it's done in such a way that it seems like it should be there. It's not very obtrusive, and you're still able to see the image and still be able to read the text, which is the whole purpose of what we're trying to do here. So how do we go about creating this effect? And it's actually very easy. Uh, I'm going to show you how to do this in GIMP, but it can be done in just about uh, any program that handles layers with in the way that GIMP and Photoshop does. Now, what we want to do is we want to start off by creating. Okay, one of the first things that we want to do, in this case, I was having a little trouble doing it this way, but in theory, one of the things you should be able to do is to, from your color selector, one of the options that you have is the eyedropper, and you should be able to choose a color uh, from your image. Well, for some reason, while I was trying to record this, I discovered that I was not doing things the way I expected it to. So what we can do is use the normal eyedropper tool, and and one of the things whenever I'm pulling a color, I like to, using the color picker tools, I like to do a sample of 3 pixels in radius. It just kind of helps to blend it, make sure that we're not getting any peaks or valleys there. And in this case, I'm going to use the info window so that we can help see which color it is exactly that we're getting. Now we can do any number of things. We can do something from this dark area over here, but instead of doing something black, let's do something that's going to fit in a little bit better with the image. And in this case, you're seeing that it's coming up black. Well, part of that is because I need to make sure I'm looking at the image itself when I do this. And now whenever I go in here, you can see that's actually not a pure black. There's actually um, uh, uh, got some variation in there. But instead of going with this really dark, almost black looking color, I'm going to go with something a little bit lighter. And that's a pretty good shade right there. What we want is something that's going to be nice with the image, but yet still provide some separation with the text itself. So this is a different enough color from the text that we should be able to get some nice little separation going. So with our color chosen, what I'm going to do is we're going to make a selection from the text, And with GIMP, what we can do is we can, over here in the layers area, on the layer uh, area, we want to right click on the text layer and we want to choose alpha to selection. Now that will make everything that is a text a part of a selection. Now, in order for us to be able to see this effect, we actually want our separation layer to be wider than the actual text. So what we need to do is we need to grow our selection, and you can do this at any level, but 3 is actually a pretty good little, for an image this small, 3 is a good level. You can play around with this depending on depending on what your image is, how dense it is that the image that you're working with. Now, with our selection now set, we need to create a new layer, and we're going to give this a name. We're going to name it text separation. It's always a good idea to name your layer so that you can, if you come back to it later, you know exactly what it is that you were trying to do with that particular layer. You want to make sure that we are using a transparent layer because we want to be able to see the image in the background. Now, once we have our selection and once we have our color chosen that we want to use, what we want to do is use the bucket fill tool to fill the selection with our color. Now, don't panic if you notice that this just covered up the text, and if we were to turn off the selection, you would see that we have kind of the same thing that we had a minute ago, only in reverse, because now we have the darker parts that are kind of blending in. What we're going to do is we're going to use a filter here. We're going to give this a blur, and the one I like to use is the Gaussian blur, and you can kind of play around with what the settings are. This default of 5 usually works just fine for me. And now that we have this text separation layer, okay, to get the effect, all we need to do is make sure that we move the text separation layer down below the actual text. And then now you can read the text very clearly. You can see the image behind it. And the text separation layer is of a nice enough color that it goes well with the image, even if it's not, even in the places where you don't necessarily need the separation. Now, one of the things that you can do with this is, because sometimes that can be a little strong, what you can do is adjust the opacity of the text separation layer to make it a more subtle effect. And just play around with that until you get something where you have the separation where you need it, and in the other places where you don't need it, it's not nearly as noticeable that you have that separation layer there. So that's really all it is to creating the text separation layer. This is actually an effect that I use quite a bit whenever I'm doing images for a post. Like I said, it can be very helpful in doing a header image. Anytime where you've got text that you want to put on an image, and you have places in the image where you have a bright color, and you have places in an image where you have a darker color. Sometimes across that, when you go transition from one to the other, if you have a solid background, the text is going to show up just fine. But if you have a variations in the image that you're using as your backdrop, you can run into problems with the image being readable. And this is an easy way to fix it in a way that looks like it's supposed to be there. If you'd like to see more video tutorials, you can and other resources on creating images, both in GIMP and in doing 3D images and other things, you can check out my website at gradypruitt.com and check out the resources that I have there. This is Grady saying good luck with your images and so long for now.